Hello, hello, hello. Hola, hola, hola. Welcome to a new episode of the Yoga for All Bodies video podcast. As you can see on your screen, today I have an amazing guest for you. Marsha Danzig is the founder of Yoga for Amputees. She's a below knee amputee, pediatric cancer survivor, and kidney transplant recipient. Marsha is a 30-year veteran in yoga studies with over 40 plus years living as a below knee amputee. She's a pioneer in adaptive yoga, and as a founder of Yoga for Amputees, she has developed a unique approach to body and spirit wellness, which greatly enhances a sense of wholeness for people who have experienced limb loss. Hi, Marsha.
Hola, hi Natalia.
Hola. I'm so excited to talk with you. Even before becoming a yoga teacher, I encountered your work on the internet, on social media. So when I created this video podcast, you were always on my wish list of people I wanted to talk with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I would like to ask you, how did yoga came to your life?
Well, a number of different ways. When I was a little girl, I was a gymnast and a ballerina and swimmer. I'm very active. And I used to read this book called the Guinness Book of World Records. And there was a story about a yogi in there. And then there was also a story about a man from India who meditated a lot, and another man from India who held his breath for long periods of time. So I was experimenting with those kinds of things as a child because the shapes of the poses looked like gymnastics to me. And then when I was in California, I lived there, my friend and I were in the Mojave Desert, and we were on some rocks, and she said, "Would you like to learn yoga?" And I said, "Sure." But then I had already lost my leg, and I had a prosthetic leg, and it wasn't very good, so I didn't know if I could do it or not. But she taught me Surya Namaskar, sun salutation, and I felt like I had known it my whole life. It was very familiar to me. And then I was in academia. I was getting my PhD, and I got very sick. My kidney stopped working, and I was on dialysis for a long time. And so I left my PhD program. I didn't know what to do, and I had a very spiritual experience where I felt called to become a yoga teacher. And within 3 weeks, everything lined up. So things just kept coming. Yeah. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do, I guess. So.
Meant to be. And you were mentioning that your friend taught you a Surya Namaskar, a sun salutation, and you had your prosthetic leg. Did she adapt it in any way?
Oh, no. We were young. We were in our early 20s, and it was the 1980s. Nobody was really doing yoga. She had discovered it in Los Angeles, and so she loved it and wanted to share it with me. She just taught me the basic, I think Surya Namaskar B, just basic, and I followed her, and I don't even remember what I did or didn't do. It was so long ago, but I knew it in my body. That's the feeling I had, that I knew it already.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And what's the story behind Yoga for Amputees? How did it start? Why did you create it? All the details.
Sure. So I had been teaching yoga for a number of years as an amputee. So I tended to have people in my classes who felt comfortable because they had a physical or emotional challenge, and they knew I wasn't going to judge them, and I had understanding. And so I taught just regular yoga classes for many, many years, but I always worked privately, and I got certified as a yoga therapist in 2001. So I was always working with people with special, unique bodies. And I would be asked to go teach with different groups of kids with special needs and all of that, because they just, again, nobody was really doing that in those days. So I wasn't expecting to be doing Yoga for Amputees at all. That's sort of the way my life has been. So somebody called and said, do you work with amputees? And I said, well, I could work with you. And then it turned into something else. And then by the third time I said, oh, I am now. And then it was official. So I think in 2008, I made it official and, branded it, did all the, the Western stuff, the brand, the trademark, all those things, just to make sure that it was protected. And then started training other people in how to work with amputees. So it's been whatever, 2008. So 13 years, maybe 13, 14 years. Something like that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's so important and so powerful what you're mentioning, because representation matters.
Yes, it sure does. Yeah.
So maybe a lot of the students saw you and they say, yes, this is a class for me. Because
Yes.
as you were mentioning, there's no judgment and you know it in your body, because we can study so much, but we will never have the experience if it hasn't happened to us.
Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of the people that are trained Yoga for Amputees teachers are not amputees, but they have experienced loss and they have experienced a sense of an amputation in some way, like something extreme. And they're very wise. They're wise and sensitive. They tend to be very special people working with this particular population. They have a need and an awareness to make sure yoga is available for everyone. Yeah.
Amazing. And thank you for mentioning that, because sometimes we stay in the physical aspect. But as you were mentioning, there's way more deeper things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I know a lot of people, it's again, the amputee world has changed. The disability world has changed. When I was younger, when I was teaching at the beginning, there was nobody doing what I was doing. I think there was one other woman in the United States that I knew of that was an amputee. She was an arm amputee, and that was it. And, I don't know about India or other places, but nobody was specifically standing out as an amputee. And a lot of it had to do with activism and changes in technology, because now amputees are everywhere. They're on, every commercial practically, it seems to me. And, and I certainly know many people who are models now. And I know when I tried to do those things, it was just like, what are you crazy? Like, we don't do that. So now it's representation does matter. And it's because of the work of people with disabilities. And we can talk about that word or not, but, in terms of disability activism, that's usually the word that's used. And it's because of people standing up for their right to be seen and heard and visible and live normal lives that all of this is happening. So many amputees just take a yoga class at a studio, but there is something special about being with a group just like you, because we use different words and different lingo. I mean, we do different things, whereas maybe in a regular yoga class, and I'll say a non-adaptive class, it wouldn't occur to the teacher to say, feel free to take off your prosthesis. And the person might feel uncomfortable because people might look at them or, just it might be weird. Whereas in an amputee class, if the teacher says, feel free to take off your prosthesis, is because we know the reason why. And then when people look and stare, it's because they want to know where you got your prosthetic and who is your prosthetist.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And in the same line, how would you describe a Yoga for Amputees taught by you? What can someone expect if they go to your classes, if they practice with you online or social media?
So what's different immediately is it's a little busier because if I'm the only teacher, I demonstrate the poses standing, seated, and on the floor. So some people can stand, especially if they're arm amputees, but some people are missing all four limbs and some people don't have prosthetics, some people are in a wheelchair. So I want to make sure that everybody can find the way to do their pose that's best for them. So it is a little bit more, I'm going to say more hectic in that sense that it's just me. but I would try to be as smooth as I can. And then there's just themes that are, I think, specific to amputees around balance and coordination and different physical parts of the body. Also a lot around visibility, it's a little jaded, so I'm gonna say this a little cynical, but I see a lot on teaching to equity in yoga and inclusion and body positive, and almost never do I hear anything about disability within those conversations. I'm usually the disability cheerleader that comes up and say, well, you're talking about people of color or people who, identify as, but I don't hear anybody talking about people with physical or mental challenges. So we're still kind of a little bit, there's just still a little bit of need to make that more aware, right? That makes sense.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And especially in yoga, that is a practice that by nature is for everybody. So
yes, yeah. And also just really practical issues of accessibility. I mean, I remember I went and observed one of my student teachers, and she was teaching at a studio, and they said, oh yeah, it's handicap accessible and anyone can enter, but the hallway was so narrow and they had the props in a certain way that certain people could not get into the yoga room because it was too narrow for their just normal size wheelchair. Like the wheel would get stuck on the props and then they were, on their own, kind of stuck between. So just there's, you can say you're accessible, but are you? And I've even taught in studios trainings, and I'll say, I had said out loud, no one who's an amputee in a wheelchair can participate in the sample classes here because there's no elevator and this is all stairs to get in here. So this is not an accessible yoga training, if that makes sense. So that happens fairly frequently. So it's just, again, expanding our awareness and cluing in more about what that even means. Yeah.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning that, because it's true. And especially on social media, that now even more with the pandemic, we're seeing everything on social media. So many teachers are saying, yes, my class is accessible, but if you start digging, it's because they offer blogs. And no. It's so much more than that.
Yeah. Yep. And even, I've seen adaptive yoga, and I don't know, it's just, there, again, this is changing, but there's beliefs that I've seen with well-known yoga teachers teaching adaptive yoga, and putting quotes, that limit their students around what their capabilities are because they think that it's not possible for them. And I also spoke about it this year because when the pandemic started, everyone was talking to the experts about resilience and adaptability. And I said, well, you're forgetting the biggest group who are literally adapting every moment of every day. And they're so resilient. Nobody's talking to them as the experts because they're the experts, and they're doing it, and they're doing it really well, and they're building the resilience muscle really well. So that's still a conversation that needs to be at the forefront.
Yes. Oh, I got the chills. Yes. And it's not the first time I hear you mention this. I think I saw an interview, maybe. I don't remember where, but it's stuck in my mind. You were mentioning something, so correct me if I'm saying it wrong, but something in the lines of that we need to stop believing that the person we have in front of us is super fragile because they had to adapt their whole life when they lost a limb, when they are basically adapting everything every single day. So they know
Absolutely.
How to do it.
Yeah. So they're actually very creative, very inventive. And I think for many amputees, and I'm going to say anyone who uses any kind of mobility device, is very, yes, some people are angry, of course, but some people are really amazing at having a sense of humor and I'm telling you, there's a video that I love, and maybe you've seen it. It's a guy who's in a wheelchair. I think he has cerebral palsy, and he's a comedian. He's so funny, and he decides that he wants to go get the most famous donuts in New York. And he starts his journey early in the morning, like 7 or 8 in the morning, in his wheelchair to go to Brooklyn to this famous donut place. It takes him all day to get to the donut place. They're almost closed when he gets there. And there's a step, and he can't actually get in the donut place to get the donut. So they have to come out, and then he's got to go all the way back into Manhattan where he was. It took him until, I forget, like 6 or 7 in the evening to use handicap accessible features in New York City. So, and he did it as a joke, but he just said, this is what it's really like to adapt. And it took me all day, where it might take somebody else an hour and a half to go from Manhattan to Brooklyn to get the donuts and then come back. And, took him all day.
Yes.
Yeah, time is relative. Sometimes.
Yes. And it's something that we really need to speak about, because, for example, I'm from Chile originally. And yes, and in Chile, for example, the sidewalks are always broken. You can go with a stroller, with a wheelchair, even walking, you can fall. It's like, that is the norm. So when I moved here, now I live in San Francisco, the sidewalks are relatively fine. So for me, it was like an improvement. But once I started entering these circles about accessibility, disability, now I have a different eye. Now everywhere I go, I see no ramp. There's a step. There's no elevator. The doors, tiny. And it's like, I can't even pass walking. How a wheelchair will go here?
Yeah.
And a lot of the yoga studios here in San Francisco are not accessible at all.
Yeah, and it's very expensive to make those changes too, and a lot of studios are struggling so much to get by right now that's another consideration. And also a lot of them are what they call grandfathered in, so they don't. We even had a discussion in my building this week about, I live in a condo association, and someone was saying, well, I'd like to get a handicap space. And I said, well, I'm actually the only legally disabled person in the building. And I can tell you that there's no handicapped accessible entrance in the whole building. So having a disability parking space is completely irrelevant in this building because it's old. It's, 150 years old. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I would think that change is happening. We're doing the work, right. and that's why we're here also talking about this too.
That's what I'm saying, that by taking, making people aware, and yogis are so, yoga teachers and yogis are so, in general, so sensitive and kind and thinking about that, and the more it gets out there, the more people are saying, oh, let me think of a way to change how I'm going about this, what words I'm using, and how I can be more inclusive. And again, now it's very common to have a teacher talk about those things. It wasn't even 5 years ago.
True.
Right? So,
yes.
Yeah.
And how would you say that someone that has experienced limb loss can benefit from yoga?
Oh my gosh. There's just so many different layers to that. For me, I'll speak from my own experience first and then what I've observed, because it runs the gamut again. I'm a very traditional yoga practitioner. So to me, yoga is all of the limbs, all of the practices, the meditation, the mantra, the mudra, the pranayama, asana, shavasana. And not all yoga that's taught more in our, I would say, Western world, sometimes in like Hong Kong and Japan and just other places that are kind of, more modernized. It tends to be just very physical. And that's a great place to start for many people. And it's certainly a great place for amputees, because getting back in your body after losing a limb is so vital. and moving your body is essential to your health. And many amputees have other medical situations going on. So it's really, movement is the way to maintain some health, or a lot of good health, depending on what your condition is. So I'd say that's really important to begin with. Also, a lot of amputees deal with pain, chronic and acute pain from their limb loss and from repetitive use and injury. And so what I've heard over and over again over the years is, I forgot my pain during yoga class. And when we did that deep breathing, the pain was gone. I just wasn't thinking about it. And what that says to me is the mind was in its own inner drishti, right? It had its own focus on their bodies, on their sensations, on the moment, on feeling good. So that's an immediate side effect. And for amputees, that's really important. And I also think balance, really, practically balance, which, for a lot of leg amputees, they want, a lot of them do want to be able to walk if they can, and would prefer to look as normal as they could when they're walking, and be able to stand upright without being exhausted or feeling like they're going to fall down. And not everybody can do that. So that can be another aspect. But for me, the biggest one is that yoga is the Panchamaya system, right? It's all the koshas coming together. And so, I have had amputees in my classes cry just from meditating on their wholeness, because they felt like they were no longer whole because of their limb loss. And then that gets into all the other things that are associated with that. What can make you feel separate? You're different. You can't do what you did before. People look at you, you have a scar or a series of scars, or you're wearing a prosthetic. That's an obvious prosthetic. You're more visible than you want to be, and people, some people treat you differently. Your family cannot come through sometimes, or you might be the one who's really difficult after your limb loss, and everybody just doesn't want to be around you. So all those things come up. And I think that's where yoga can really get into, just going back to ahimsa. Number one, if you can find a way to be good to yourself and kind to yourself, and forgive yourself if perhaps your amputation was part of not taking care of yourself, then you've done it. Then you've gotten the depth of what yoga can be for you. I hope that helps.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And what advice would you give to yoga teachers that maybe they are ready to teach their class and they receive someone with a limb loss, and they have that mini heart attack? What do I do? What advice would you give them?
Sure. Well, I do recommend getting the book because it's pretty practical. It's called Yoga for Amputees, The Essential Guide to Finding Wholeness After Limb Loss, and it's by me. But that's a really good practice to have with you, because it's like, okay, this person is what we call an AK amputee. That's above knee, and they're walking okay. They look a little unstable, and so you can go to the book and say, oh, what do I do? How do I teach Warrior 2 to somebody who has this? Like, what can I do with all these different variations and ideas? The other thing is to help strongly encourage an amputee to go towards a corner in the room so that they can use two walls to support themselves, and to encourage props as strengthening and challenging, as opposed to just supportive and a crutch, if you will, which I think is kind of what happens sometimes, that, if you can't do it without the prop, then you're, I don't know, there's just some belief around that. But actually, it's really hard to hold a prop between your thighs in chair pose or above your arms with your hands, or if you have no hands and you have forearms and you're working on internal rotation or external rotation, that adds another layer of strength. So building strength and making sure that they're using the limb that's missing. what I mean by that is if they have enough residual limb that they're actually using it, because it's going to be a little bit thinner, it's going to be less muscular, and as much as possible, you want to strengthen that limb so all of it doesn't fall onto one limb to support you, because then you can get arthritis and all sorts of other things. Anything else? Treat the person like a person and not as a delicate flower.
Super important. Yes.
Yeah, because some people get really nervous and either talk in a higher voice or pat the person on the shoulder, and just little things anything that feels patronizing. People that are just want to be treated normally. And they don't want to be, usually most amputees don't want to have too much attention on themselves. They would prefer to just be one of the students in the class. So, but you do have to be aware of just safety precautions. You don't want to touch the prosthesis at all, if you can help it. And you never want to use the image of imagine your limb is there, because the brain has worked really hard to get that the limb is somewhere else. So, yeah.
Amazing tips. Yes. Yeah. And the book is an amazing resource. So go and get it. Yes. Amazing resource. So needed. And yes, inviting to imagine the limb. No.
And there are teachers who do it, and there are amputees who do it, but you see, yoga's deep, and there are when I did my training through an ashram, and they were doing things with people way back in the day, like in the 70s and 80s, where people were having profound kriyas, experiences, but they were not ready, and then they were having nervous breakdowns. So bodies are not always ready to take on the image of envisioning the limb again. Some people have the yoga mind to do that because they've done a lot of meditation. They can look with equanimity and balance, but I think the majority of us, it's just going to mess up your brain. Mm-hmm. And then you have to start all over again. So it's not worth it.
No. And what would you say have been the biggest challenges that you have faced since the creation of Yoga for Amputees? And also the biggest reward, what makes you wake up every day to continue doing the work?
Yes. Okay, challenge. I would say for me, the only challenge again is I'm very traditional about yoga practice. And so I personally have a hard time just teaching a vinyasa and, or power yoga or whatever. And thinking in my mind that that's enough for the amputee student. So for me, my own challenge is to balance the deeper practices of yoga with giving someone an opportunity to feel confident in their body by doing the physical challenges. That makes sense. So of yoga, etc. And also, honestly, there aren't a lot of resources out there for me and Yoga for Amputees teachers to actually get paid. Almost all it's expected to be volunteer. I got a grant this year, which was great. So my income comes from training teachers and doing presentations, but most amputees have a lot of opportunities for free things. So that's been challenging to even do donation classes. I know it sounds kind of shallow, but it's just, we live in a particular society where there's a need to have a living, and there's also, I think this has changed too, because there's so much available that's okay, but not great for amputees. Just personal opinion about like, oh, I look at some people and they're going to do such and such a yoga practice, and I'm like, oh my gosh, but they're going to adapt the way they adapt. But it's kind of like, why would I pay you if I can do it for free, right? So I think the model probably has to change then. So I do give a lot away. There's a YouTube site, there's free resources on my website. So I think there has to be some kind of thing around energy exchange in some different way. If they can, and a lot of the amputees, it's just costly to be an amputee, and especially again in certain countries, it's more costly than in other countries. So, that I understand. So I'm thinking and continue to think around ways where, this is really just a service, seva, and there needs to be some kind of energy exchange that might not be financial. It might be, I don't even know yet, but, so I know I feel really bad saying it, but that's been a challenge for the past.
Yes, and no, I totally agree. And especially in all the yoga for disabilities, it's true. They assume that it's like, you're going to be a volunteer. Yes.
Right. But that also assumes that a person with a disability doesn't have a job or income. Right? So, yes. And I certainly know many amputees who pay to go to the gym, and, so it's a very interesting, that's probably a really good discussion to have too in one of your podcasts around that, because just like other people, we are working, and yes, a support group, of course, I'll go and give a talk, and but 30 support groups in a month, probably, that's a lot of giving without too much exchange. So that's really important to have that, all the boundaries and clear. So I know, and I also know for myself that I'm a teacher's teacher. So I thrive with teaching the physical therapists, occupational therapists, recreational therapists, yoga teachers, yoga therapists, physicians. That's where my work is usually where I'm the most comfortable. And then when I teach to my amputee family, it's just hanging out with family. So that makes sense, because we can just be ourselves together. And it is different, but that's I think the biggest challenge. And the blessings are, I don't know, just I'm always reminded of, again, that human resilience. It probably sounds corny to some people, but I never get tired of it. I had my own challenges, but then I have had people that lost all of their limbs, all 4 limbs, because they had septic shock, and they're doing it. They're doing life, and they're managing, and they're coming to yoga and trying it out, and they want to live full lives. So to me, that's incredibly moving. I also find there's so many amputees that I've met who, how would I say this? It's been interesting, and again, it sounds sort of like cliched, but there is something about losing something that makes you realize what you've got and to treasure it more than anything. So I have met a lot of amputees who have made really dramatic choices in their lives because of their limb loss. Like either they've married the person that's been with them forever, or they divorced the person that's been with them forever, or they decided to learn how to run again and they never had before, or ride a bike and they never did before because they had, a chronic situation. So I think there's been a lot of, I think it can motivate a person to really get clear about what matters. And I also think there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love in the community, and watching out for each other. So, and I think it's a funny, weird thing too, because, you know, when I'm out and about and I see an amputee, I'm always like, oh, I want to go talk to them, you know, but a lot of people are not comfortable with that. They just want to live their lives. But I'm always like, oh, where are you going to get your prosthesis, you know, and how are you doing? Would you like to do some yoga with me, you know? And so you have to kind of be careful about that too. But I think there is a connection that among people who have similar situations that is undeniable. Every person who's lost a limb understands what it's like to have to adapt to washing your dishes or getting in the car, or, you know, if you don't have a car, then getting outside, you know, to live your life out the door. Like that can be complicated for, you know, a double arm amputee. Like, how do I get out the door to go do what I need to do? Mm-hmm. How am I going to cook my dinner? You know, how am I going to eat my dinner? Right. So to me, that it's that innovation that's just incredible. And that takes a lot of human spirit.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing this, for give perspective, especially for someone. I don't have in my near family or friends someone with a limb loss. So for me, this conversation has been amazing because because I know the theory, but I haven't experienced it myself. So it's amazing to know firsthand and to also realize, as you were mentioning, that there's so many layers, that it's not only what you see, what you assume, what is portrayed on TV, on social media, so many layers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just with every human. So, and I will say too, you know, each place is different. United States, I think amputees have become more visible. And I don't know what it's like in Chile, you know? Maybe it's
starting to be more seen, but there's still that culture of hiding, leaving the person at home. And yes.
Right. Yeah. So again, that's culture and accessibility, like you said. So that's just, you know, beginning to change mindsets. And I would say, and I don't know the statistics are in Chile either, but in the United States, it's about 300 to 400 a week that lose their limbs. That's a lot.
A lot.
So, and I don't know in Chile, and there's other places that I was shocked by, whereas there's a place in Asia, not Bali, some place that you would never expect, where they have really high limb loss, and it has to do with lack of access to healthcare and just what's available for food, etc. So, you know, you'd be surprised how many people have lost limbs around the world. And so, and then again, in the United States, there could be more availability to try to salvage a limb as opposed to amputate it, whereas in other places, they might not have the capacity to save the limb. Mm-hmm. Right? So, you know, it's just different.
So interesting. Yes. Yeah. And finally, how can people find you? Give all the information about the training, the social media, everything. Promote yourself.
Sure. Okay. So the main website is yogaforamputees.com, just YOGA and then FOR, and amputees, AMPUTEES.com. And then there's a YouTube site with some free practices. We also have Yoga for Amputees on Demand, which is videos that you purchase access to for the year, again, very low cost. Lots and lots of specific videos for amputees of all different levels and abilities. Then the book, Yoga for Amputees. There's also, I think even there's a great, when you sign up, or if you sign up to the mailing list, there's a great ebook that you get, which gives, I think, 6 or 10 poses and adaptations for how to teach. So, and then we have trainings. So most of them are done online now, and they're usually small. I might have 1 or 2 people, which I love, but from all over the globe, so I do address time zones differently. And then Yoga for Amputees is the social media where I met you.
Yes.
So that's at Yoga for Amputees. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marsha, for sharing your passion. I'm super grateful for this conversation, and I have no doubt that people watching are also going to value it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you in person and talk to you. And if my Spanish was better, I'd try it in Spanish, but I'm only at 50%.
Maravilloso. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for asking me. So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too. Thank you one more time.
Yes.
A big hug in your homes also. So if you're watching this video, like it, share it, subscribe, because this is a message everybody needs to know. Yoga really is for everybody, for all bodies, for all minds. Yes.
Yeah.
And see you soon in a new episode of the Yoga for All Bodies video podcast. Bye.
Bye.